Morning, everybody, and welcome to CRI's webinar on GCS to Costpoint 7 conversion. We're kind of looking at this topic from the client view today. So, but administrative note before I get started this morning that this webinar is for information purposes only. There will be no interaction between myself, the presenter, and the attendees. So if you would like additional information on this topic, we have my contact information is the last slide in the slide deck, and we'd be more than glad to hear from you and then talk you through anything you might need. So with that, again, GCS to Costpoint 7 conversion, the client view. My name is Dave Newton. I'm the Director of Business Systems here at Corporate Results Incorporated, and we have a team of professionals ready to serve you in that project. So the agenda for this webinar, as you can see, is we're going to look at the client needs and objectives on a project like this. We are going to talk about, why Costpoint makes sense leaving the GCS platform. We're going to have a discussion about planning for a successful transition. You can see some of the topics we'll be talking about there, especially around the licensing and external partners, pros and cons, what success looks like on a project like this. Then we're going to dive into the actual conversion process itself. CRI's 9 steps to success. Very important to us that we follow those. Important for you to make sure we follow those. And then we'll talk about the time frames. We'll have a deeper discussion about the process itself. And then we're going to go over some time savers and tips. So from a client needs and objective standpoint, there are 4 areas that we look at in terms of what we see with clients that we've done this for over the years. And the first one being flexibility. They're looking for additional flexibility that the GCS product does really not allow them, which some of these things are listed here. Project work down break structures. They need more levels. They're more complex wins, BPAs, GWAC contracts, things of that nature. GCS just cannot allow for a robust work breakdown structure at the project level. Unlimited indirect rate structures. Obviously, more pools are usually needed as a company grows. There's only so much you can do from a rate structure standpoint in GCS, and with Costpoint, there would be other options. So some of these needs. Multi-company, again, growing. Probably acquiring some companies, adding new lines of business that might be set up as a separate company. Automated revenue calculations, very robust need when you get more and more contracts, especially things like GSA contracts where you're maybe offering volume discounts or rate ceilings and things like that. So again, just needing more flexibility in a system. Then we go to things like visibility. Visibility into what? Well, into the business processes. A lot of folks are maybe running purchasing in a manual process. They have some spreadsheets, things of that nature, need some access into the AR collections process. What's going on with my cash? So again, we've got disparate systems, most likely want some visibility into those. Also would like some visibility in terms of the better program management reporting. Get rid of the spreadsheets. The PMs have all different versions, and so we get to one version of the truth is needed because at some point you're having meetings about project financials, and people are coming with all kinds of their own little homegrown spreadsheets. So there's usually a need to provide one version of the truth. Also would like, most likely maturing organizations look to things like, hey, dashboards, what kind of things can I quickly get to see where the problems are? Exception reporting, KPIs, key performance indicators, in terms of what KPI means there. The ability to drill down and through different types of reports. A lot of those things you cannot do with a GCS platform. And we have integration issues with GCS. So we need to integrate seamlessly between time and expense vouchers and some other areas of accounting, such as maybe as a credit card, a purchase card integration that you would like to have. Then there's the HR integration pieces where we might have an externally facing applications module from a different vendor that we would like to have integrate into our HR system or at least our employee master database. Okay, I mentioned credit cards for AP and expense vouchering. And you also probably have some integration needs with some other software vendors. The biggest one we see is benefit vendors, so that we don't have to do double data entry. We enter it into our system, whatever that system is, using GCS, and then we have to go into Blue Cross or one of the other benefit vendors, Delta Dental or whatever, and enter enrollment data or change data for that particular employee. Then we have the automation need, the need to invoice for Akron and interface with the government, the wide area workflow for submission of invoices. So we really need, and with small companies, cash is king. So improving the day sales outstanding is very important to turn that cash around. So automation helps with that. Other types of automation that companies look for example, is the AP to fixed asset integration, the ability to have AP purchase a capital asset and for a one-step process to be run that then sends it to my fixed asset module so I can have the accountant start to depreciate it and track it and things of that nature. I might, as I start to grow, have a need for tracking government property on fixed asset module. So these are a lot of the needs. These aren't all encompassing, but these are the highlights of what most companies are facing as they continue to grow out of that GCS product and have a need for something else. So why Costpoint? So as you see here in this slide, I've used the same 4 points to call out the things that Costpoint addresses. So from a flexibility standpoint, that WBS, it allows for a multi-level WBS, up to 30 alphanumeric characters with limiters. So, I've seen plenty of companies that are 6, 7, 8 levels deep. We would want to discuss that with you in terms of that. There's trade-offs to some things as you're creating that, but the ability is there to go as deep as you really probably need to go. Costpoint allows for the unlimited number of indirect rate pools. I've heard, down from 20, 25 with, pools all the way up to hundreds of pools. So unlimited number again. It does have true multi-company functionality available. There are some things that we would want to talk to you about in terms of setting the system up to do that, but there are 2 different ways to handle a multi-company environment in Costpoint. So there, as you've kind of already heard me say, all options are available. The nice thing about Costpoint is it provides them. Complex revenue calculations are available, rate hour ceilings, and many, many more things. In Costpoint, you start with a base revenue calculation formula, and then you expand upon it with many, many different options. I list 2 there. There are at least 8 to 10. Visibility. One system for all business processes. So that's a great thing about Costpoint. It is a ERP system. So you have the ability to do purchasing from within Costpoint, the ability to do your AR within Costpoint. It's all integrated between the modules within. So as I'm creating that invoice and posting it, it's going to the AR module and I can see it there for collection. I can make a call to a customer. I can put customer notes in there as to what the collection status is, et cetera, et cetera. So again, we get to that one version of the truth. There's robust program management reporting within. I mean, there's some standard stuff that I'm sure you've all seen, but if you then, and in most cases with the licensing, which we'll discuss here in a little bit, you're going to have either the Costpoint Enterprise Reporting, the CER, or the Costpoint Analytics, and maybe you would have both depending on what type of licensing you choose. So there's very robust program management capabilities moving into that Costpoint environment. Integration, Deltek suite of products completely integrate. So in terms of your time and expense with ESS, it's a one-stop shop that Deltek sells with the Costpoint product. You get your timesheets, you get your expense vouchering capability, and then you can add on the employee self-service, which opens up a whole nother world to the HR standards in terms of who owns data, who can change data, and just saves money in that organization as well. So there's all kinds of built-in integration points between the suite of products. Costpoint 7 comes with the preprocessors. There's interface preprocessors for things like AR and AP vendor, et cetera. So you have the ability to bring data in from other sources quickly without data consultants. Now, that's not the case throughout the system, but in a lot of the areas, the workflows that would be created on a fairly daily basis could be covered. Then, to cover the things that maybe aren't in the interfaces, you have web services. to provide functionality to interface with other packages such as, and we called it out earlier, the benefit vendors, banks, et cetera. So there's lots of options depending on what you're doing with your business to actually interface with other products via the web services consoles that Costpoint allows for. Automation. The automated Akron billing worksheet and billing screens means no more spreadsheets to track the Akron data if you're required to with the government in terms of the funding for all those accounting classification lines. So that's already automated. I know plenty of companies that have these spreadsheets and they're all over, and Lord knows they struggle with keeping them up to date. So that's automated, for an example. We can create the WAWF file is built right into the product. There is no additional programming needed. It's push the button and it creates the file, and we load it into the government system. So there's no more fat fingering, and there is much more capabilities that Costpoint 7 will provide to you in terms of automation. So now we're going to start talking about planning successful transition. I mean, planning is a very important part of this whole thing, going from GCS to Costpoint. So, these are some of the things that you need to consider. So things to consider as you're putting your transition plan together. You want to understand your licensing options right out of the gate. I mean, Costpoint has 3 tiers of licensing. A lot of it is based on headcount, but even within headcounts, there's things that your company might need at a smaller level that maybe a larger one is needed. So there are some things we're going to talk about, those licensing tiers. You should understand the IT environment choices. So with the licensing, of course, from an IT environment, you have on-premise, which means your company's providing the servers and the environment that the software is sitting on. And then you have options with cloud, and there are other things as well. So Deltek has a whole host of options there. Or maybe, again, you have your own on-premise need to have that license, and Deltek for years has done that. So then you're going to need to assemble a team, and maybe it's all internal. Maybe you have some expertise in-house, but in a lot of cases, there is a need for external partners, and that's what we're here for at CRI. We would recommend that small teams work best in terms of the total number of people on the project, but the biggest thing to make sure that you do is to make sure that all major business functions are represented. So don't leave the ops people out, for example. Don't leave the billers out because, it's just billing. So make sure that if not on, they don't need to be on every meeting, but most certainly make sure there's a representative available as you need them in and out of the project. But make sure that everything is represented. After all, we're doing an ERP system, so we're not doing just an accounting system. In the old days of Costpoint, it was, it's just an accounting system. Even though it wasn't, you need to make sure that as you're implementing all these pieces and parts, that the proper people that do the work, decision makers, are in the room. Know your external partner. Know what they're bringing to the party. Know who they are and what they're bringing. Understand their strengths and weaknesses. I mean, each vendor, regardless of size, is going to have pros and cons, and we're going to discuss a little bit of that as we go here. You're going to want to make sure you define the project. So again, understand your licensing options. We'd mentioned the tiers. It's important to ensure the project is completely successful and on time. That sounds like a no-brainer, but you get into some of these projects and things drag. There's no reason to have them drag. If you have good program management, there's no reason from an implementation standpoint. These GCS to Costpoint implementations have been going on for 20 years now. So the vendor that you would work with, or even internally, it should be a predefined set of time depending on data and how much change you're going to go with in terms of going from that GCS product to the Costpoint product in terms of the things we'll talk about, account, project, things like that. Have a project plan and a schedule. Okay, so one of the things, and there's many when putting that plan together in the schedule, is to decide on the number of tests that you'll need. And you'll see CRI has, in our 9 steps for success, we have a predefined number that we feel comfortable with. It's not set in stone, but I'll discuss why we're comfortable with them as we get into the process itself. Develop a communication plan. This is one thing that is not done often when things are done internally, sometimes without a program manager, or even externally. A lot of folks don't do the program management because they feel that the cost would be prohibitive to the project, or the client is maybe indicating, well, I don't have a lot of money, or I need to do it on the cheap. the thing I can't stress enough is planning and management are going to save you money, because the more you have to do the old Henry Ford rework is going to cost you time and money. So having a strong program management piece on the job with a good schedule, with a great plan, is going to save you money in the long run. And CRI has plenty of success stories to tell about how we are strong in that area. So, one of the things we said to consider was licensing. So, one of the things that I wanted to make sure we covered was the types of licensing available through Deltek. And one of these is new. That Costpoint Fundamentals that we're going to start with on the left is a brand new licensing option, just started March 1st with Deltek. And as you can see here, it is a cloud-only package. So you would be going, contracting through Deltek on a SaaS engagement. You would be getting the Costpoint core modules. You would be getting equal number of licenses to time collection. So if you were buying a Costpoint core license for 100 employees, you would get 100 employees of time collection. You would get a 30% license for expense. So if you, again, back to the 100 number, you would be getting 30 licenses of expense. You could, of course, purchase more if you felt the need. But the reason they do this is because a lot of times they're not rolling it out to the whole company. They might be rolling it out to just the travelers, which makes sense. You'd be getting a subscription of Kona, and then you'd also be getting the enterprise reporting bundle, the CER that we had talked about a little earlier. And then you see here the available add-ons. So at the bottom, you'll notice that it says only available to companies with 150 employees or less. Okay, so this is really their small market Costpoint package. It goes all the way down to, as small of a package as 10 employees for the start point, up to 150. Deltek has indicated there's a little wiggle room there on the top end, but mostly for GCS to Costpoint conversions. Okay, so keep that in mind as the discussion would take place with Deltek on licensing. Then we get to that middle section, which is the Costpoint Essentials. They really would like this to be cloud-based with them. In case you don't know, that Deltek offers cloud through Amazon. They're obviously got several clients that they've been able to successfully do this with over the last year or maybe even 2 years now. But basically it's Costpoint Essentials, Costpoint Essentials Plus, or the standard care in terms of packaging, what you get. So in terms of the core, you still get the core and you get the time collection and stuff that you see in that first box. And then you have some add-ons there. So again, some add-ons. And then they added some a la carte options. Costpoint Analytics comes in here. The shift time and the manufacturing education system and the budgeting planning are all additional add-ons that you can have. So in other words, much more robust licensing involved in that Costpoint Essentials. In their mind, targeted toward companies with 500. That is where they are now with the Amazon cloud. Deltek is looking at increasing that number from 500, but they really would like to have it to be 500 so they can make sure that they're getting the right scalability and so on. So even though that is out there, I'm sure as you would talk with Deltek, maybe that number would be slightly different. We'd be more than glad to help with the discussion with Deltek. Obviously, we're a Deltek partner and would welcome the opportunity to go with you to Deltek and discuss your needs. We feel we are very good at understanding your needs, and that's our focus. Then you get the Costpoint Enterprise. That's the a la carte packaging model that they've done for years with the perpetual licensing, which is on-premise. So in other words, you've got the hardware, you're putting it in your servers wherever they are, and that's where you're going to go ahead and deploy those from. And again, you see here the Costpoint core, the time collection, the employee expense, so on and so forth, and lots of add-ons. So in other words, a la carte. Get what you want, how much you want of it, and roll it out. So again, targeted to 500 or more. These numbers can change throughout time, so I would not use them as a hard number. Things to consider if you're going to go out to an external partner. I mean, one of the things that I put this slide in for was I really don't think that folks understand that there are differences to the help you can go out there and get. And in the last year and a half or so, I've run across many a client that really, if we're left wanting more, is really the words that were told to me by lots of clients I've run into over the last year. So I felt the need to kind of put this slide in today. And as you see here, we've got individual consultants, a lot of folks that have run Costpoint for maybe one company, or maybe they've worked at one of the services firms out there for a year or two, or maybe even worked at Deltek for a year and two. And, I've been doing this for 20 years. I've been a system administrator. And so this is kind of my story from your view, because I've sat in that chair and I've seen what is being offered out there. So, the pros to an individual consultant will, not many. They cost less. I mean, they'll be the cheapest price in the marketplace, and they're most likely local, so you won't be worrying about travel. But there's, in my mind, a lot of cons. There's the breadth and depth of their systems knowledge. If you're putting an ERP system in, do they know all the modules? Do they know all the domains in Costpoint? Have they put ESS together? So, that's a risk. That's a risk that you'd have to weigh. Lack of resources. Again, if they're just an individual, can they reach to get something they need? Do they have some sort of partnership? I would be asking those questions. They tend to be services, not process driven. So it's more about, let me just jump in and get the job done. And the danger in that is they get you down a road that then they realize they aren't going to be able to deliver what you're asking for with your needs, because they probably haven't done a requirements document. They might not have done a business analysis. So they're not as thorough with the process. And then how much program management and documentation of your project and things like that are you getting? And especially if you do have some sort of SOX requirement stuff, they're probably not going to understand your need to document this, especially if your organization has change management requirements and things like that. So I think there's enough risk there that you should consider. Then you've got a functional services firm. That's where CRI sits here. We've got, we're not selling software. Okay, so we're not coming in looking at you as a client and saying, oh, we think you need this and we think you need that, and so on and so forth. We'll be glad to walk your organization through a system selection process, and return on investment is part of that equation. So for us, it's about what you need, not what we want to sell you, because we get nothing out of bringing software into the equation. We provide functional services to help make sure it runs the way you need it to, but we get nothing off of any kind of software sale. So we don't sell software here at CRI, and we're relationship based. We want a long-term relationship, because we know that not only are you going to have this journey in terms of a project, but you're going to have others. You're going to have other needs. You're going to have maybe more robust reporting than what out of the box gets you, or you're going to have a contract that you win that maybe is, for example, wage determined that you didn't have before, and setting that up in Costpoint is separate, or even union functionality for employees. So we look for a relationship based not engagement based, which we'll talk about next. We are process driven. I mean, we have a firm commitment to program management and documentation that gets provided. You can talk to our clients about that, the dashboards we provide on a regular basis in terms of communication plans and things like that. We also have the breadth and depth of systems knowledge. I mean, we have a small team here that have run the Costpoint suite of products, which is front end and all the stuff that are around Costpoint for over 20 years. So we have, and I mean individually. So I mean stacked up, if you put my team here at CRI together, we have well over 100 years worth of total experience in putting these products together and making them work the way that they're supposed to. We have team resources. I just mentioned that we have a team over 100 years experience. So we have team resources. It's not me by myself or any of our other people by themselves. We really truly have a team. We communicate as a team. We have resources as a team. So if somebody out on the road needs something that they haven't seen, and believe me, in 20 years of doing this, there's lots of things I learn on a regular basis that are different about the setups. So there's no cookie cutter approach to this. If somebody comes in to you as an external potential partner and says, oh, we do this, be wary, because you might not be getting what you need. You're getting what they want to do. Cost competitive. We are cost competitive with individuals in terms of our rates, as well as the large firms. Matter of fact, we're the green dot here thinks we feel that we're in the best position of all in terms of being able to help you with your jobs. The cons for us is, hey, we probably have some out-of-town resources. We have a couple people throughout the country that, depending on when we need them, we might have to bring them in. So travel is part of the budget. We don't bring them in for a vacation. We bring them in to do the job and get them out. And then we have to admit that there is probably somewhat of a limited resource pool. I mean, obviously, we're not a large firm. We don't have 50, 60 people sitting around. So, depending on schedule and stuff, we might have a resource issue. We do a real good job of that. We haven't had any resource issues to speak of at this point. So, I mean, it's something that we just want to be honest about. We're honest brokers. We're not trying to sell anything. We want to help. It's a relationship for us. The large software vendors and accounting firms that offer services, the pros are their one-stop shop. I mean, they probably have plenty of people. Resources, I put not always there because I want to talk a little bit more about resources in some of those firms. And then they have a 3-tier system of support. It's hard for them to be flexible sometimes. And again, they might have their own ideas about stuff. The cons, they're, in some cases with these firms, they're always looking to sell something, whether they're the software vendor, they're looking to sell software. If they're the large accounting firm, they're looking to grow their revenue. I mean, do your due diligence about, are you going to come in and do my job and do what's best for me? Or are you going to be looking for that revenue? I mean, we're all professionals, and some of those larger firms are looking for the next dollar, not so much looking for your next need. They're engagement based. They're in and out. I can't tell you how many times I've heard clients tell me, well, they came in, they did their thing, and they left, and I'm not sure how to run it, or I'm not sure what they did. I'm not sure why they did it, but now it doesn't work the way we wanted it to. Or the comment of, I was wanting so much more. I've been in behind some of these larger firms, and again, they're engagement based, in and out. The resources, well, do you really know they're coming from where they're coming from, or are they subbing to a second tier? Are they subbing to a third tier? I mean, we have relationships with lots of these folks. And so, it's a good question to ask. If I'm running a procurement, which I've run plenty of them, I'm asking the question, who's on your team? Are they dedicated to this job? I mean, when we put the schedule together, are they going to be double booked? I mean, I've run into that with clients this year telling me that they've engaged these larger firms, and they get a call the morning that they're expecting the consultant to show up, and they say, oh, well, we're sorry, we double booked them. When can we reschedule? Well, I'm pretty sure that doesn't make you as the client feel good. You're like, oh, so I wasn't important enough to be first on the schedule. I'm the guy that gets called for the double booking. And then there's switching. Heard lots of stories out there. Some of the larger firms are switching resources out. So that costs time, because now you had somebody in, you've spent the time helping them understand your needs. They've been working, and now something happens at the larger firms where they've double booked, or maybe that person's moved on, or whatever the case might be. And now they want to switch. Now they want to delay your project to bring somebody else in for various reasons. Maybe they ain't working out. There's lots of reasons out there is all I'm saying. So consider this when you consider partners. So criteria for success, when we're doing jobs, there's lots of them, but these are a lot of the big ones. No interruptions in ongoing business processes. There's no company that wants to not have their timesheet entry or expense vouchering, the payment of their vendors, their month-end close, management reporting, billing, et cetera. Nobody wants interruption in any of that. So that's a criteria for success. And if there are firms out there that say, oh, well, we can't do the billing, then it's not a good project. There should be no reason why everything can't be done within a schedule and a time frame. Heard lots over the last year about, we've had the vendor come in to do GCS, the Costpoint conversion, but we haven't closed our books now in 3 or 4 months. And I'm not talking about a single story like that. I'm talking about multiple stories like that. So, that's not criteria for success, that you can't close your books for a couple months after doing this type of job. Costpoint to GCS is not rocket science. It's a thing that's been going on for 20 years. All system modules function as they were designed day one. So billing, fixed assets, payroll interface, whatever it is, they should all function from day one. There shouldn't be any, we didn't do this right now. We have to make some sort of change, and next month it'll work. That's not the answer. Not here at CRI. You'll never hear that from us. All report data is accurate and available. So we ensure during our processes, we're going to discuss that the balance sheet, the income statement, the open ARs, the open APs, all balanced, they tick and tie. We'll talk about that as we go through the process. Project management reporting, the training is done and online. That gets to the next major point, that everybody's trained. And any reference materials and checklists are ready to go. That when the new system comes on board, that everybody's, maybe not the most confident, but most certainly they can begin their jobs on the day of the go live and continue on, maybe with some light help desk support, which we'll also talk about. CRI feels is very important for a job like this. Okay. So now we'll talk about the actual process itself, the GCS to Costpoint 7 conversion process. So here is CRI's 9 steps to success, and we start in the upper left-hand corner with the technical installation of software. So we coordinate with the vendor, regardless of whether that's Deltek's in the cloud version, whether that's an on-premise with your people, whoever it is. We have an interactive role. We have some technical expertise. We make sure that we understand when the products are coming up, how many databases we need. There's a bunch of stuff around the project plan that talks about that, but we start there. Have to have a working environment. And so that's step 1. And then we work our way through this. We get to project planning and scheduling. It's important to have that project plan and schedule, and then you look at it and see if the work packages make sense and who the resources are. And your people most likely still have their jobs to do, but we're going to talk about that when we get to planning. Do you have enough bandwidth internally to have a person do their job day in and day out and then do this project? Because there is a lot of work for your team to do because it's your system. So, you and your team have responsibility to a successful project to make sure there's time. We're going to go through some business rules analysis. We're going to look at all the functions being put into the system. So we're going to go through AP. We're going to go through labor. We're going to go through your leave. We're going to go through all those business processes and rules and document them so we can understand then how to get to the next box, which is, the requirements and design sessions at the top. So we're going to document the requirements. We're based on those business rules now. So we're going to document those requirements, and we're going to say these are the things that are necessary to create success in that module. From there, we start data mapping and conversion. So we're going to have here's what's in GCS, here's what's going to Costpoint roadmap, if you will. That's what data mapping is. And then we're going to have an actual system conversion. In conjunction with those 2 boxes, you got the system implementation. So there's several control and setting screens and various things. There's a whole list of things under that box, but we have to get the system ready to actually use once the data conversion is being done. So they're a little bit simultaneously, but I called them out separately because one is a mapping and a data conversion specialist working there, and the other is each individual stakeholder working to get their modules ready to roll. The next step then is a first test conversion, and we call that a functional training and testing conversion. So we're going to do some training of some basic functional training for the users that are going to participate in that first level of testing. And then we're going to do some functional testing. So functional testing, we'll talk about what that means in a little more detail here in a second. Then we have a second test, which is more of a full-blown integrated regression testing. So we're testing the systems such as time collection and the expense, the reporting, the Cognos, the CER. Maybe we're interfacing with ADP, things like that. We're actually testing that whole system is an integrated test. Regression testing is the tick and tie. The accountants are looking at the balance sheet, making sure that the balance sheets not only balance, but the numbers are where they're supposed to be. The income statement is what it's supposed to be. The open AP, so on and so forth. There's a whole series of actual tests that we conduct. And we're going to talk about how CRI has all these systems documented with test scripts. And I'm going to show you an example of that. We're one of the very few firms that have test scripts. You'll hear a lot of people say, oh, well, how do we test? And a lot of these firms out there will say, oh, just run your process. So I'm not sure how they're accounting for that in terms of being able to show somebody that's actually been tested thoroughly in a regression test, because you're most likely dealing with people that have not seen Costpoint before, going from GCS to Costpoint. And so just telling them to run their process in a system they've never run before, I think is a risk. So CRI has all of the systems, all of the modules, document it with test scripts that we then slightly modify based on your business rules. But from a systemic standpoint, it covers all the functionality that needs to be looked at in the system. And then we get to a point where we're successful and everything's running the way it should. And then we talk about go live preparations and post go live support. And we'll talk about what they mean here in a little bit. So just, some general timeframes. I'm not going to take a whole lot of time on this one, but, as you can see here, we've got, these are subjective in some cases. I think it's a point where as we put the plan together, but I wanted to show everybody approximately what we would think in terms of a minimum amount of time needed to do a GCS to Costpoint. This is by no means everybody. This is maybe in some cases people would say is a very aggressive schedule. Some people would say, well, it's the normal schedule. You can talk to lots of vendors out there and they'll tell you various things. I know that the large software vendor is talking about quick conversions, quick starts and stuff like that, and we can discuss those with you as well. There's lots of things to them that need to be discussed before you go about them, because a quick start, there's some trade-offs with a quick start is what I would say. You might not be getting what you need, you might be getting what somebody else wants. So again, just a short time frame here, a little pictorial of approximately 14 to 16 weeks. And again, that would be done with you. So the process, I know this is a little bit of an eye chart. I'd prefer to do a little more pictorial, but we talked about project planning, support, and communications. I think we've talked about that. That's a schedule, that's work packages, the communication plan on how we're going to communicate. At CRI, we like to set up SharePoint sites, and we give our clients access to them so we can share documents, we can share notes, we can communicate, we can document. There's dashboards, things like that. So we have a whole rollout of things that we do with our clients that we think is very important to the project, not only for you as the client, but for us as the partner. We're going to go through some business rules analysis. I talked about that. We're going to review all of those business processes that will be implemented in the system. So we touched on that briefly. We have a whole set of questionnaires that we go through, and they're going to be interactive discussions. We're not going to come in and dictate. We're going to come in with questions, and that's going to be a collaborative thing between your team and mine. We're going to document the requirements. So after we get done with that business review, we're going to call out the things that are absolutely required in the project that, hey, we have to do this or we have to do that. And those things are going to be documented. Okay, so that way, that's part of the path of success. If we don't have the requirements documented and you do a system and it goes live and somebody says, well, where's that? And everybody looks at each other and says, well, I don't remember that. So we document the requirements. We're going to talk about data conversion specification. We don't want to bring bad data into Costpoint. That's one of the biggest things. Okay, so we're going to kind of have to talk honestly about how that GCS data looks, how far it goes back, how much of it you want to bring in. And there's lots of choices there. I've done a lot of things over the years with these conversions in terms of timing and data history and things like that. So it's not as easy as just saying bring it all, and it's not just as easy as saying bring in just that. There's a discussion around it. I mean, it's not long, but it still needs to be had. We're going to, from there, then we have our requirements and we have a data conversion specification that we're working from. So now we can go to design, and we're going to document that design. So we're going to look at the rules and the things that are required, and we're going to come up with what does the WBS look like? And that's the why pillar in Costpoint. Okay. Then we're going to do the general ledger accounts. That's the what pillar. What am I charging to? We're going to have an organizational design session, which is the who pillar in Costpoint. So who initiated that charge on what project? So Costpoint stands on those three. They are the primary design components of this product, but there are others. Okay. So there are other IDs that need to be talked about, employee IDs, vendor IDs, etc. So there's, in terms of materials management, there's parts and product definition. And so there's other things that need to be discussed. The three primary being project, account, and org. Okay. Once we have the design completed and documented, then we can go into that system configuration. So the IT will be done at that point, putting the IT environment together, and we can go into one of a couple or maybe even a few databases. We're always going to have a control configuration database. So we're going to be able to go in there and do the control and setting screens. We're going to be able to go in there and do the system security, set up the user groups and users and file management. So there's a whole set of activities around getting that system ready to actually get the data in it and then work with it. Okay, so we're going to do that system configuration or system implementation piece at that point in time. And we're going to do it based upon the design document that we have created. Okay, so we're going to do that work. Then kind of in conjunction from a timeline, but after, if you want to look at it that way, the data mapping. Somebody has to actually take that data from GCS, from a project account org standpoint, maybe even employees. There are other mapping tables that might need to be done depending on the project, but the three main ones have to be done. So I have to map that WBS, that account, general ledger account, and the organization aspects out of GCS into Costpoint. So that's, there's no magic there, folks. It's an Excel spreadsheet that has, here's what's in GCS in one column, and here's what's going to Costpoint in another. And that's how it's been done for forever, and that's how it gets done. I mean, it's not, again, not rocket science. It's numbers, it's data, and we tell it where to go. Okay. Once those mapping files are done, and they take some time depending on what the resources are, because a lot of times that's like the controller or the assistant controller gets a lot of that information. And depending on how much data we're talking about, how big your chart of accounts is, how big your project structure, or how many projects you have, that could take some time depending on the design. Okay, so it's hard to say exactly how long it'll take, because especially if somebody's good at Excel and stuff, they can write these little formulas, or we can help do that. So, but it is a tedious process. It's part of the success. Then we're going to do a test conversion. We're going to take those mappings and we're going to hand them to some database personnel, and they're going to do that extract, transform, and load is what it's called. It's called ETL. Okay. While they're doing that, we're going to then launch off into some user training. We're going to start creating maybe some training media, depending on what things we are trying to train on, especially depending on how complex your business processes and rules are. And then we're going to do functional testing. We are going to, as I mentioned before, we're going to make sure that I can put an AP voucher in, make sure that I can put a check against an invoice, make sure I can create an invoice. So there's a whole series of test scripts that I'd mentioned. I'll show you an example of one here in a second. Upon completion of that functional testing, there is a review of all the test results. And we're going to have an actual, kind of a gate meeting here. All these things have gates to them. So where we're going to stop and breathe for a second, like your parents might have told you, count to 10. Well, that's kind of what we're going to do here. After the first set of testing, we're going to take all the test results and we're going to go and have a discussion about, did we meet all the requirements? Did the system function as we intended it to? Did you get the output you were looking for? So we're going to ensure that all the requirements are met. Very important. So I just thought this next data flow example was a good one. It's how we would like to do our data flow. So you have GCS there on the left and all the component pieces to it. And we would go into a test CP1, test CP2, and Deltek. There are your three environments. We've done as few as 2 environments in terms of that. It all depends on, are we on site? Are you paying for those databases? And what do we think we're doing with them in terms of, is there a multi-company thing where we want to do? So there's lots of things that'll dictate how many of those. But at a minimum, you're going to have 2. You're going to have a test and a production, the production being the last one there, the Deltek CP. You're also going to have a config database. And so after we do that initial configuration of control and setting screens, we're going to do 2 tests, as you saw in our 9 steps to success. So we're going to blow out what they call blow out that database when we get to integrated regression testing, but we don't want to blow out all the control screens. Who wants to re-enter those? So once we get the control and setting screens done, we save that out as a config CP. And even during the project, we might be saving things over there, such as the chart of accounts. Maybe it's good and we don't want to blow that away. And so it saves time on the conversion. So there are some money saving steps that you can do in terms of the config CP, in terms of data conversion time and stuff like that. So just a general view of what that looks like. This is our test script example. I keep mentioning them. So this is a small example. This is the first of what ends up being 2 pages on this product. But as you can see here, it has a number to it, when it was created, who it was. It gives a general description of what we're testing and what the end result is supposed to be. Then we have actual step-by-step processes that the user that's doing the testing actually has to perform, and then they have to give a rating whether it passed or failed or what actually happened. So as you can see here, we have a step that has an expected. So if you can kind of see it there, it would say, hey, go to customers and enter a new customer. And so the expected outcome is that the customer has been added and the system is able to save it. And so they would say, yeah, as expected, and pass, fail, yes, no, and the date, and they would put their initials. So now after the tester goes through this test script, then they give it to a reviewer. And it's usually along the same workflow that you would have on your team. So if somebody who does accounts receivable had to pass that to their supervisor to get approval on it, they would then pass it to that person. They would review it. And then CRI, actually at the end of the test, we gather all these things up, one, to make sure they're a part of the project documentation that we do, but two, we do a QA against these to make sure that, hey, you know what, these are folks that haven't run Costpoint before. Let's really look at the backup documentation that gets included in the test case and what is being said to make sure that nothing gets kind of falls through the cracks. So the tester does it specifically according to some steps. The reviewer looks at it and the backup documentation, they approve it, and then we have the safety net, as it were, in terms of the quality assurance. So we are very deliberate about how we go through that test script. We're going to continue on the process. So once we get done with that functional testing, we're going to take the time to, as I said, discuss, did everything work as it needed to? And if it did, great, that's what we're hoping for. But if it didn't, this is the time now to make changes. And so that's the question then. Are there any changes that need to be made to the design or the mappings? And I can tell you right now, there are going to be changes that need to be made to the mappings. It's never, usually ever, right 100% out of the gate. It has happened, depending on data size and stuff. But a lot of times you get stuff and say, oh, you know what? I mapped that over there and I really should have done this. So a lot of it isn't so much that there was a mistake made. It's just that there's decisions that weren't thought about, maybe in terms of where that data was being put. And so you're making some changes. So it's not a pass fail thing. It's more of a, if I were given the opportunity to make a different decision, I would have. So it's not a pass fail. We're then going to go into a second conversion routine. So the mapping files will be updated based on any changes we make, et cetera, et cetera. And then we're going to do that second test conversion again, hopefully saving a lot more time. And in CRI's world, we do save time. That first one takes a little longer because it's an initial conversion, takes a number of days depending on what we're doing. But that second one, thing about the second conversion is we're almost treating that as a mini go live. We are trying to get it into the smallest bucket we can because a lot of these conversions happen over the weekend. We'll take your system down on a Friday and have it ready to go for Monday. So in the way that CRI goes about this, that second test conversion is a mini go live kind of exercise, okay? Coming out of that conversion, we do regression testing. That is a completely tied out balance sheet, income statement, open AR, all of the things that financially you'd want to tie out. It's documented. Again, that's all put in the archive of the project because in a lot of those SOX environments, your auditors are going to want to see those, or even just internal change management boards are going to want to see that those things happen. I've had to, CRI has had to go before change boards within companies and present that information to get the okay to elevate to a production. So we believe in that. We embrace that methodology. And so you're going to have that record created. Like I said, a mini parallel. A lot of people want to do full parallels. Oh, we want to run our system in parallel for a month or 2 months. We don't recommend that. We believe that our 9 steps to success ensure, and we have references to speak to it. We do not believe in parallel running between GCS and Costpoint. So we have this mini parallel type approach where we're going to do a full payroll. We're going to enter all the different types of employees you have. So we believe that our process with our documented test scripts and the quality assurance we provide completely encompasses everything that's going to be done to the point where running parallel is just running you crazy. And we just don't believe in that. We're going to do integrated testing. We're going to test out that time and expense, export, import, getting information out of Costpoint over there and back the other way from a timesheet and expense perspective. We're gonna test all the Cognos reports out of the box. The ones that come out of the box, we have, again, test scripts for each one of those based on your project. We're going to test any other integrated pieces. So if we're using the employee preprocessor, that would be tested. The AP voucher workflow automation that you might be looking at that we'd be putting in place, but any kind of integration that we're doing between the Costpoint system and other systems is going to be tested with that same approach, that same test script that says do this and whether it pass and fail. From those test scripts, we get then an issues log, and then that's the other way we track what's going on, what's not happening the way it's supposed to. So we actually do an issues log during each of these tests, and that's one of the gates that I talk about. You must clear the issues log, or at least have an issue that's not, is not a project go no go kind of issue. Something that right now we know it's broke, we know how to fix it, and we're going to do that during the go live. But it has to be addressed. All the issues are addressed under our 9 steps to success. After that second conversion, again, we're going to review the test results. And there's a lot more to review because we're doing that mini parallel. We're doing that integrating testing. So the testing circle is expanded, and we're going to review all those tests again. And then we're going to have some conversations. And again, another gate to pass. Once everybody agrees that we've passed the gates and that we can go to a go live situation, then we're going to have some go live preparation. And what that means is we're going to prepare a cutover plan. There's going to be some things, if you got an on-premise license, that we're going to have to do technologically. We're going to have to coordinate with the database administrator that's going to do the conversion. There's going to be some reconciliations that will be done. Obviously, we talked about complete tick and tie of the balance sheet, stuff like that. That happens on the day of the conversion. All the project status reports get reviewed and checked off. So there's a whole flurry of activities that happen over that weekend that get staged, and people are in and people are out. So we actually will prepare a cutover plan depending on the individual project and have them all put on that plan. Any end user training is then accomplished. So we had some testers getting trained, and we might have expanded that testing circle in the second test conversion, but they're most likely not all people get trained in those first 2 testing. There's still a couple people in some cases that need to be trained, or maybe it's the end users on the new time collection or the end users on the new expense vouchers, because we have that increased flexibility. So we took advantage to make things better for them. So there might be training of your whole company from an aspect of almost anything. Maybe we're doing purchase requisitions for the first time, so we have a new set of people to train there. So all of those people are being trained prior to the go live. We're training them on what they're responsible for and how to go about doing the things that they need to do on a daily basis to get their job done. Then we have post-implementation support. So after that weekend comes and goes and the system's up, CRI is a firm believer in providing some help desk for the end users. At the end of the day, they've been trained thoroughly, they've got resources, they've got checklists, all the things that we've put together in the project, all the things that you as the client have asked for. But at the end of the day, we still believe there's going to be questions. And there might even be an issue. It's rare from a standpoint. It's more about the user remembering the training they've had maybe, or just a little nervous, but we're there for you. Okay, again, not engagement-based, relationship-based. We will have a help desk set up with tier 1, 2, and 3 support, concierge-type support, if you will, to make sure that you get through your first couple of days. If not month. I mean, this is part of the discussion of the relationship, right? We'll be around as long as you want to have us along for the ride, but we will ensure that your first month gets closed. So everything to do with the close. Balance sheets, ties, income statement, pools are run, billing is done, invoicing is sent to the government, whatever it is. And we're going to put that first month of close support into our project plan, and it'll be there for you to see. And then are there any items that did get moved to a post-live go status? Let's face it, everybody has this version of here's what I want out of my system, and it's the Cadillac, right? You've documented everything you want. But maybe your budget doesn't allow for it, or maybe your resources on your team don't allow for it. And so instead of burning those resources out, the team says, maybe it makes sense to do this post go live. Maybe it's iteration 1, because we're all trying to improve. So there might be some things for very valid reasons that got moved off of the go live date that now you're looking to start, or maybe there's a breather and then it's a start. Maybe it's after the first quarter or whatever of running Costpoint. So are there any things we need to be tidying up and getting ready for? I believe in lessons learned, and not just for my team. My team needs to hear about the job they did, whether whether great or maybe need improvement in some areas. We want to gauge that feedback even as the project goes on. We will talk about that if you want to hear more about that, get in touch with us. But we want to know how we did, and then even internally, there's things that a lot of times when I'm running procurements that you thought, oh, geez, if we ever do anything like this again, we want to note it somewhere. So again, part of the archive that we would put together would be a lessons learned. So now we're to time savers and tips. These are the things that I've seen over 20 years of doing this that I wanted to share. Get management support for the project. Have a sponsor. Have that executive come to the kickoff meeting. Have them show up periodically to a monthly meeting or a quarterly meeting, whatever length of your project. Have them be involved. They're not going to get down and dirty into the data, and they're not going to get trained on how to put in an AP voucher, but it's important to have somebody from your executive team as the sponsor. Have a dedicated program manager if possible on your side, but if not, then let CRI know we have people that do this for a living, and we just talked about our process, and so we all live that. So that's a very strong program management approach. And so if you would like us to be more prevalent in the management internally of resources and stuff, we'd be glad to do that for you. We're not going to push our program management onto you, but that's a discussion. But it is important, no matter where that program management comes in. Get buy-in from stakeholders, communicate. I can't stress enough. I know it sounds like a chore, and on the project plan, it looks like, oh, just another thing to do, but you want people to know what's going on. So when we talk about that communication plan, we'll have many different medias that we're going to use to keep people up to date with where we are, how things are going, who's going to be participating. And some of it's not as hard as you think. Okay. But communication is key with anything. Can't stress this enough. Spend enough time on the planning and design. It will save time and money. The whole, I just want to jump in and do it and let's see what happens. It's going to cost you more time and in the long run, more money. You won't get what you want. So I kind of mentioned that whole quick start thing, and, just be careful of any vendors that are out there talking about, oh, we've done this for years and this is what you need. I've run into some of them, and 2 or 3 years later, you're calling somebody else back in to redesign the product because you accepted here's what you need, and you didn't tell them that that's what you need. So, you run the project. It's a relationship, not an engagement. Evaluate your GCS data prior to the first conversion. We'll do that with you. We know what to look for. Just a couple of examples over the years. These are some almost guaranteed ones. Vendor payment terms tend to be lots. The same net -30, the same net space 30, the same NE 30. It's just one little example of cleanup that you can do to your GCS data prior to a conversion. Duplicate vendor IDs, etc. Duplicate employee IDs, maybe. Have good infrastructure support, whether that is your IT support or the vendor. If you're going to a cloud thing, make sure that they give you the support you need. Make sure you know who you need to talk to, when you need to talk to them. Good IT support is important to a project like this. Use the 2 databases. We talked about that, the config database and the test databases. It saves time when the control settings and any of the other screens get used. It does save time and money. So you definitely want to make sure that's the approach, whether you do your project with us or not. Again, these are all things that you need to consider. Train users prior to testing. Okay, a lot of firms are just going to say, oh, run your process. We talked about that before, and they don't give you a test script like we do, and they leave with the quote unquote, that's your homework, and then they come back and say, well, did you do it? And we're like, well, we had problems and we couldn't get a hold of you. Okay, so train your users, make sure that your partners are engaged and available is what I would say. And for a project like this, be flexible. Always have plan B ready to go. I mean, we've done this for a long time. The folks that work on our teams here at CRI have done it for a long time, and nothing always goes the way planned. We try our best to make sure it goes as planned, but sometimes things happen, and you have to be ready to handle those things. And so we think our program management approach with our issue log and our risk log and the scripting that we do with the testing and stuff like that ensures that we're following our plan, but if something happens, we know it's happening. So nothing's going to fall through the cracks. Okay. With that, this is my contact information. tickled pink to so-called talk to some of you folks about your projects or give you some more information about our process and how we do it and what we believe in terms of bringing that service to you. And with that, I'm going to go ahead and end this for today. So I thank you, and we hope to hear from you soon.